I am going to be the moderator for the first session of the day, which is entitled Emerging Trends in Business, and that is all about boardroom and C-suite impact. And what we're really going to be exploring is the percentage, where women are today in terms of the percentage of senior roles they hold, both within organizations, corporations, as well as on boards, and what we need to do to move that forward. So I think over the last number of years, the data around how underrepresented women continue to be has become more and more known. But I think what we still need to do then is ask the questions, what do we do about that? How do we use that information? How do we move forward from there? And specifically, as I think about the questions, my first one is why. So what does it matter that women are underrepresented? What is the business case that says to corporations and to boards that this is the right area to be focusing on? To continue the work that has been done and is being done to move women forward. And then separately, what are some great examples of success? Where is this being done well and how is it being done well? So those are the areas that we hope to explore this morning. We have about 50 minutes together, so we are going to at least start you thinking hopefully about some of them. And because of that, I am extremely excited with the panel that we have got this morning. I've talked to each of them briefly. Oh, I'm turning my mic. I sound like I'm getting really loud in my own head, but it's not my own head. Turns out I'm getting really loud for all of you as well. As I said, very excited with the panel that we've got this morning. I have had the chance to talk to each of them briefly over the last couple of weeks, and I can tell you they have a tremendous amount of energy for this topic. On my far right is Lisa Bedford. Okay, I only had one cup of coffee. Lisa Heidman, who is the Senior Client Partner North American Director of Bedford Legal and brings over 15 years of legal, business, board, and executive search experience dealing with CEOs, senior executives, and best-in-class talent within a wide range of industries, including financial, legal and professional services, retail, consumer goods, food services, real estate, healthcare, and pharmaceuticals. She works with boards and senior leadership teams, placing C-suite executives across functions and their critical supporting teams. In July 2009, she was appointed to the Board of Directors of Women of Influence, one of Canada's preeminent organizations for recognizing high-powered senior executive women and inspiring and developing professional women throughout Canada and the United States. She was also appointed to the Canadian Senior Executive Task Force responsible for launching the Women's Food Service Forum in Canada in 2009. So welcome, Lisa. Next to Lisa is Jim Musica, who is the Vice President and General Manager, Xerox Global Services, Xerox Canada Limited. In this role, he is responsible for all aspects of the Xerox Global Services business in Canada, including overall strategic direction, sales coverage, marketing, operations, and finance. His focus is to provide the highest level of client satisfaction while capturing the growth potential of Xerox Global Services. He is on the board of directors for the Information Technology Association of Canada and the Canadian Women in Communication, and actually in April of this year was awarded the Canadian Women in Communication Leadership Excellence Award in the Champion of Women's Advancement category, and is also the executive champion for the Women's Alliance within Xerox Canada. And to my immediate right is Sandy Cimarroni, who is the Senior Vice President, TD Waterhouse Financial Planning. She has over 20 years of experience in the financial services industry and has held increasingly senior roles in a variety of businesses at TD, including retail banking, mutual funds, and wealth management. In her current role as Senior Vice President, TD Waterhouse Financial Planning, she is responsible for leading the financial planning business, which includes over 700 financial planners located across the country. She is also an active member of TD Bank Group's Women in Leadership Council, leads the bank's Women's Networking Program, is a member of the Flexible Work Options Committee, and recently took on the role as chair for the Women's Investor Strategy, which is focused on serving the needs of the female investor. Welcome. So I think without even asking a question, you can see these folks are pretty interested in the topic that we're going to address today. So I'm going to start the session by asking them some questions directly, but we will also be leaving some time at the end, a good chunk of time to ask questions from the floor. So please, as you're listening, if you've got questions coming up, save them, and we will have a session at the end where you can ask the questions. So I think just to jump right in, you have to remember I jump right. I would like to just start by asking each of you brief background on how you got involved in supporting women's advancement, and I'll just start with you, Lisa.
Hello, first of all, it's an honor and pleasure to be here. I feel the enthusiasm in the room. There may be more as we're on rollers and I may go right off the stage, so if we get overly excited, just know that. As you heard, my background is I was a merger and acquisition lawyer for many years. I started in Toronto at Davies and then practiced in Boston, New York. And when I look back to my law school class, there was more than 50% in school were women. In fact, I think it was 52% of the guild. 7 years later, I was sitting around in a boardroom in New York on a very large transaction. I looked around the room and there were 25 gentlemen and myself, investment bankers and the board and lawyers on both sides of the room, and literally me. And I kind of looked around and went, where did everybody go? And that was a real scene for me. I've been passionate about diversity issues my whole life and providing opportunities for top talent. But fast forward, I'm now a senior partner, and I place CEOs and senior executives on both sides of the border in a variety of different industries. And I'm passionate, and because I fundamentally believe in the business case, that it's just smart business to support senior women and mentor and provide a really warm arm for those that are coming up in our ranks. So I'll be discussing that in a short moment, but great. That's how I got involved.
I echo Lisa's comments. It's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation. I got involved when I moved back into Xerox a few years ago. They were looking for a champion for women, and traditionally that is a role women have occupied. When I started to do a little more investigation on the business case and what was in hydraulics and what was really going on, determined that if there was really a business case for gender diversity, the way there was a business case for Lean Six Sigma or for quality in an organization, well, why the heck does the job need to be occupied, for the most part, by women? So we decided to put a male in as the champion. And, you know, it became this virtuous circle. I joined the ITAC, Information Technology Association of Canada board, and the day I joined, we had one woman on a 34-member board. The business problem in the technology industry in Canada is 25% of the technology industry workforce is made up of women. In an industry that is dependent on people for progress, you can't be focusing your recruitment efforts on a fraction of the entire workforce. The majority of graduates from university these days are women, and if the technology industry doesn't catch up to that, we're going to be in deep trouble over time. Which is really the crystallization of the business case. If you start thinking about a real competitiveness and how important diversity is to it. So we initiated something that said, you know, we've made our own shoes here. We have one woman on the board, and we have terrible representation inside the industry. So we started an initiative there, and the whole virtuous circle started. We made great progress. We'll be and I'll talk about this in a few minutes, we'll be 35% women on the board by the end of June, and the new objective will be full gender balance, likely by the end of next year.
So again, thank you as well. Great to be here. Although I must say, I'm not sure when I get invited to Rome. I'm going to meet the next stop, so I'm getting that on my calendar. So for me, it's a twofold. One is I grew up in an industry, much like Lisa, that's very male-dominated in the wealth management industry. So I have, and being a female myself, I've had actually, frankly, a lot of great sponsors and mentors throughout my career. So I think it is my obligation in my role to give back and do the same for women that are attempting to progress in their careers. The other part of it, though, is I also started in the investment industry actually doing seminars for women, educating women about their finances, and through that, I think I got a real appreciation for the need to have the right representation within our workplaces to be able to serve women. So it's kind of two-pronged for me. It's what we're doing for our customers on the investor front, and also what we're doing for our employees in terms of helping them progress in their careers.
Great, thank you. Lisa, I think I'd just like to start the bigger discussion with a background on the business case itself. What is that business case for having gender diversity, and then where are we in its acceptance?
So I've delighted to chat about that. And if I had to say in one sentence, it's just smart financial and corporate performance for business. It's as simple as that, and it's a very clear message that I continually do. But there is, and that's my materials here, an enormous amount of studies that have actually demonstrated that. And I'm going to summarize probably this much material in 3 paragraphs with a few, because those from Goldman Sachs have studied it, to many articles in the New York Times and Washington Post. McKinsey studied it, Pepperdine University has studied it, Catalyst on both sides of the border have done a ton of research on this. But just high level in terms of both board and senior management teams, these are a few pieces that get picked up. So Pepperdine in their research found that Fortune 500 firms with the best records at putting women at the top were 18 to 69% more profitable than the median companies in their industries. McKinsey looked at the top listed European companies and found that greater gender diversity in management led to higher than average stock performance. Catalyst, a research firm focused on women in business, found that Fortune 500 companies with 3 or more women in senior management positions scored higher on top measures of organizational performance. In addition, companies with 3 or more women on their boards outperformed their competition on all measures by at least 40%. Wow. So significant, but just at a high level from corporations' perspective, some of the things that we see. So high level is the business and financial performance. There's just no doubt about it. Why this is, I've given this real thought to, and done a lot of research on too, and it's part of it is just getting different people with different backgrounds and experiences at the table. Whether you have a lawyer and an accountant, whether you have somebody from the US or Canada, whether you have men or women, we're all products of our environments, and we look at problems differently. And if you can get different views around the table, decision-making actually changes. I've witnessed it at board level and executive team level time and time again. And so what does that mean? It means paradigm shift, business solution shift, and that itself is a critical piece to it. So other parts that we see, corporations and financial services organizations, the top banks, I just wrote about it in one of the Women of Influence articles. And by the way, if anybody would like these sent to them on our break, just give me your email addresses. I'll be happy to do it. But it's everything from, and not in any way limited to this, from leveraging the existing talent pool, making sure that you retain your best and top talent. Those organizations that have diversity initiatives both have proven records of both engaging and inspiring their teams. It's having your employee base reflect your customer base, so that one of the banks very nicely put this, where they said, you know, when clients and employees look at us, we want them to see themselves. It is attracting the best top talents, retaining the best top talent, and as all the statistics look at that, it's really increasing shareholder value. So the issue of diversity can be quite complex and controversial in many ways, but what isn't controversial is that it's just smart financial business. And once this becomes common sense for the boards and their shareholders and their senior executive teams to all kind of get on board and understand, it's better for their customers, it's better for their employees, it's better for their bottom line, it's better for how their decisions get made, it's better for inspiring their teams, etc. I mean, there's more and we'll talk about that, but that is collectively the business case. The second part of your question was, how do we see this going? And I'm delighted that there's so many of you engaged in this room today, and there are other rooms like this happening across North America, both at the senior level and board level. So the good news is that the business case for diversity is becoming more commonplace. There are absolutely organizations, Xerox, TD, 100% being at the top of their game as leaders in their fields on diversity initiatives and programs, and they'll share their experiences and what they've been able to accomplish. Unfortunately, I get to see, because I have a broad range of practice areas, a lot of other corporations, and it's not the case across the board. So one of the opportunities that I have is to speak to boards and executive teams in the context of doing new hires to even raise the issue. And remarkably, still, sometimes we just get blank faces where people say, why is that important at all? Or, I don't think it's important. So just the education component is kind of the state of affairs that we're in, with some tremendous leadership and from some very innovative organizations, and many more still to go. I'll get back to talking about some of the trends at the end, but I hope that answers the question.
Perfect, thank you. And Jim, just building on the discussion of the business case, you touched already on the example of the board. If you could maybe go into that in a little more detail. Again, the business case, the arguments that were brought forward, looking at a boardroom full of men on why am I going to go ahead and support moving that many more women into the board.
So imagine 2 years ago, and it's, the same paradigm that most Canadian, if you look at the Financial Post 50 boards, it's a fairly small club, 2 or 3 degrees of separation, and the ITAC board wasn't really much different. IBM, Xerox, Hewlett-Packard, all the big players in the tech industry, but all contained within kind of a paradigm. So part of what's happened here, and this is the really interesting piece around the business case, it wasn't a difficult initiative to get board acceptance for. It was obvious to everybody. Just look around the room. This is kind of actually pathetic. And it was a little embarrassing to everybody that we kind of we've got to do something here. But what really happened is we started to introduce women into this environment. Typically, these women were coming from social media companies, and what really broke down in the process of shifting the balance on gender diversity is it ended the like-mindedness of the board. And if you want to talk about business performance, that's really what's happening with the organizations that Lisa was referring to. And I see this inside our own organization. We restructured the Canadian senior management team, and we have great diversity, ethnic, gender, but also points of view. And the unintended outcome of what we did on the ITAC board was introduce all of these new ideas represented by women who looked at things quite differently, had a different approach to decision making, and really kind of shattered the way we've done our governance previously, and the organization is going to benefit tremendously from it. So we see this in the Canadian organization that I work in. We have a much better, the quality of our decision making I think is much stronger because we've got so many different perspectives at the table. And I think if you're looking to the business case, that's one of the real anchors. One of the things that has come out of this is we've almost have a competition now among some of the senior IT organizations in Canada. Eric Gales, who runs Microsoft Canada, who also sits on the board, came out at a recent event and said, I want Microsoft Canada. So imagine he's sitting in front of his team, many of whom are women, many of whom are frustrated women about the path gender diversity has taken in his organization, like all of us, even if we've got good records in this area. And Eric said, I want Microsoft Canada to be the #1 place for women to work in the IT sector. That is incredibly powerful. One, Eric knows that if he does that, he'll draw on a larger talent pool and his company will be better. But every other large IT organization in that room was suddenly challenged to say, now somebody has laid down the gauntlet on a competition for talent, and it's focused on women, which means everybody, including Xerox, their game in order to stay competitive. That's where this whole business case really starts to crystallize, and I think we'll see real movement in our sector as a result of it.
Great. And on the board, as you were getting the board compelled, fairly easy once they heard the business case? Was that really what turned the tide?
In this case, we didn't need the business case. This was incredibly lopsided. Thank God people read newspapers. We needed that level of education. It wasn't something that was difficult to get going. It was quite surprising to see how the momentum built on itself. And now the board, and it's not me on the board, it's the other senior members, many of whom are male, saying we need full balance on the board and we need to be more aggressive with our objectives, and that's very positive. But they're doing that because they've, it sounded like a nice altruistic, socially acceptable thing to do originally, even if that was the worst case of digestion. But when you're actually starting to see the effect it's having on the way the board functions, people are waking up and going, okay, I get it now.
Perfect. Great, thank you. And Sandy, looking at
here. So that kind of is the two factors that have helped us drive our momentum. And diversity and inclusiveness has always been important to TD, but I think there was one catalyst of change that made a really big difference for us. So back in 2005, Ed Clark and his senior executive team formalized a diversity leadership council. And I think that truly sent a message to the organization that said, we've done great things up till now, but we truly need to get serious because of the business case, because of the war on talent, and because we hadn't made the progress that we wanted to really make an impact. So out of that diversity leadership council, we really have 5, I'll call it portfolios of focus, one of them being women in leadership.